At 6:42 p.m., my mother put my daughter's diaper bag on the porch and told me I had 5 minutes to leave. The evening air was cold enough to sting my cheeks. The porch light buzzed above us, attracting moths, while my daughter cried against my shoulder, her face buried in the blanket I had wrapped around her. My suitcase stood beside the steps, zipped, with one baby blanket hanging out. I stared at my mother. Where am I supposed to go with a baby? She folded her arms. That's not my problem anymore. Behind her, my brother looked at the floor. My aunt stood near the kitchen doorway, silent. Nobody reached for the baby. Nobody asked if I had somewhere to sleep. I was 21, exhausted from sleepless nights, still learning how to hold a newborn without feeling terrified I might do something wrong. And somehow, standing there with my daughter in my arms, I felt more alone than I had ever felt. My mother lowered her voice. You made your choices. Now you have to live with them. I swallowed hard. You mean becoming a mother? No, becoming a single mother. The words landed harder than I expected. My daughter began crying louder. I bounced her, whispering that everything was okay, even though I had no idea whether it was. My cousin finally spoke from behind my mother. Maybe if the baby's father wanted you, you wouldn't be standing here. I looked at him, then at the closed front door. For months, that was the story everyone believed. He had disappeared. He had left me pregnant. He had ignored every message, every call, every attempt I made to understand what had happened. I believed it too. That was the part that hurt most. I had loved him. Then, when he vanished, I convinced myself I had been foolish enough to trust the wrong person. I picked up the suitcase handle with one trembling hand. My mother stepped aside. You really want me gone? She didn't answer immediately. Then she said, yes. So I walked down those steps. At the time, I thought that night was the moment my life fell apart. I was wrong. Months later, my family would watch from behind glass as a convoy of luxury vehicles rolled toward them. Black SUVs, gleaming sedans, drivers stepping out in dark suits. And at the center of it all would be the man they had called a failure. My mother thought she was watching me lose everything. She had no idea she was making a decision that would eventually put our entire family in the path of the man she believed had abandoned me. But to understand why my own family could throw me out so easily, you need to know what they believed about me and what I believed about my baby's father. At 21, I still believed my life was going exactly where I wanted it to go. Before the arguments, before the slammed doors, before my family looked at me like I had become a problem they needed to solve, I had plans. I was taking classes in business administration and dreaming about opening a small event planning company one day. I loved organizing things, birthdays, graduation parties, family dinners. It didn't matter. Give me a messy room and a list of things that needed to happen, and somehow I could make everything feel under control. My mother used to tell people that was one of my best qualities. She doesn't give up, she'd say proudly, and I believed her. There was a time when I thought my mother and I were inseparable. On Sunday evenings, our family would eat dinner together. My father would complain about whoever had cooked the rice. My younger brother would steal food from everyone else's plate, and my mother would pretend to be angry while secretly smiling. Sometimes, after dinner, my mother and I would stand in the kitchen washing dishes together. One night, when I was 17, she looked at me over her shoulder and said, "Promise me something." What? Don't ever let anyone convince you that you have to make yourself smaller to make them comfortable. I laughed. Mom, who would even try? She smiled and touched my cheek. You'd be surprised. I remembered those words years later because I eventually realized she hadn't been talking about strangers. Then I met Daniel. He wasn't rich. He didn't drive an expensive car. He didn't wear designer clothes or walk around acting like he had something to prove. Honestly, when we first met, I barely noticed him. We were introduced through a mutual friend at a small community event. He was helping carry boxes into the building while everyone else stood around talking. One box slipped from his hands. I laughed. He looked at me and said, "You saw nothing." That was our first real conversation. I fell for his personality before I knew anything else about him. Daniel listened when I talked. He remembered tiny things I mentioned weeks earlier. When I was stressed about school, he'd show up with food and tell me to take a break. When I doubted myself, he didn't give me some dramatic speech. He'd simply say, "You already know what you're capable of. You just forget sometimes." That was the man I knew. Or at least, that was the man I thought I knew. When I found out I was pregnant, I was terrified. I stared at the test for what felt like an hour before calling him. He came over that evening. I expected panic. Instead, he sat beside me, took my hand, and said, "We're going to figure this out. Are you sure?" He looked directly at me. I've never been more sure about anything. For a few weeks, I believed him completely. He came to appointments when he could. He helped me prepare for the baby. We talked about names, where we'd live, and how we would balance everything. I remember one night lying beside him while he talked about the future. "We'll get a little place," he said. "Nothing fancy, just ours." I smiled, maybe with a tiny backyard and a terrible-looking couch. Why terrible? Because we're going to be broke. I laughed so hard that night. Looking back, there were signs everywhere. The problem was that when you love someone, you don't interpret strange behavior as a warning. You interpret it as something you can explain. There were phone calls Daniel wouldn't answer in front of me. There were moments when he'd suddenly become distracted, staring at his phone as though he'd received news he didn't want to share. Once, while we were sitting in my car. His phone rang. He glanced at the screen and immediately rejected the call. Who was that? Nobody. I smiled. Daniel. Nobody doesn't usually call 3 times. He didn't laugh. I just have something I need to handle. What kind of something? He looked at me for a long moment. When the time comes, you'll understand. I remember feeling confused, but I trusted him. So when he started becoming harder to reach, I defended him. He's probably stressed, I told my mother. She wasn't convinced. He's disappearing, she replied. He's working. You don't know that. I know him. My mother sighed. No, you know the version of him he shows you. I hated hearing that. Then came the day. I told my family about the pregnancy. The room went silent. My father lowered his fork. My brother stopped eating. My mother simply stared at me. How far along? She finally asked. Almost 4 months. And you're 21. I nodded. Nobody congratulated me. Instead, the questions started. What are you going to do? What about school? What about your future? What about your reputation? I tried to stay calm. Daniel is going to help me. My father looked away. My mother folded her arms. Is he? Yes. Then where is he? I didn't have an answer. That question became harder to answer with every passing week. Daniel's calls became shorter. His visits became less frequent. Then, eventually, there were days when he didn't answer at all. I kept telling myself he was overwhelmed. I kept telling my family he would come back. I kept believing the promises he'd made to me. But my family's attitude was changing too. The warmth disappeared little by little. Conversations about my future became lectures about responsibility. Questions became accusations. And the mother who once told me never to make myself smaller began telling me I had embarrassed the family. Still, I believed she loved me. That was the hardest part, because even while she was pushing me away, some part of me was still waiting for the woman who used to hold my face in her hands and tell me that she would always stand beside me. I thought the hardest part would be becoming a mother at 21. I was wrong. The hardest part was discovering that the people who promised to stand beside me only meant it while my life looked the way they wanted. And I hadn't understood yet that the pregnancy wasn't the moment my family turned against me. It was only the moment they stopped hiding it. The first few weeks after my daughter was born should have been the happiest weeks of my life. Instead, they felt like I was walking through a house where everyone was waiting for me to make one more mistake. I barely slept. My daughter would wake every few hours, and I would sit beside her in the dim light, exhausted but afraid to close my eyes because I knew she might need me again. I loved her more than I could explain, but loving her didn't make me fearless. There were mornings when I stood in the kitchen, holding her against my shoulder while trying to make breakfast with one hand. My mother would walk in, look at the bottles on the counter, the laundry waiting to be folded, and sigh. You need to get organized. I know. You can't expect everyone else to keep cleaning up after you. I would stare at her. I've barely slept. So has everyone else. That was the first warning. I didn't know there would be 5 more. At first, I tried not to take her comments personally. I told myself my mother was tired too. Then the complaints became constant. The baby cried too loudly. The baby woke everyone up. The formula cost too much. The laundry had increased. The house didn't feel peaceful anymore. One evening, my brother walked into the living room while I was trying to calm my daughter. Does she ever stop crying? I looked at him. She'll settle down. He shook his head. This whole house revolves around her now. I wanted to say something. Instead, I looked down at my daughter. She was tiny, completely dependent on me. And somehow, everyone around me was already making me feel guilty for taking care of her. Then there was Daniel. Or, more accurately, the absence of Daniel. Every time my family became angry, his name came up. Where is her father? Why isn't he helping? What kind of man disappears after getting a girl pregnant? I didn't know. That was the truth. I didn't know why he had stopped answering. I had called him so many times that eventually I stopped counting. Some calls went unanswered. Some messages showed as delivered. Then nothing. No explanation. No goodbye. Just silence. And that silence made me angry. But it also made me defend him. He wouldn't just leave us. My mother stared at me. He already has. You don't know that. I know what I can see. I shook my head. You don't know everything. She gave me a tired look. Neither do you. That sentence stayed with me because she was right. I didn't know everything. I didn't know where Daniel was. I didn't know what he was dealing with. And I didn't know why someone who had once promised me a future could suddenly vanish from it. But I refused to believe that the man who had held my hand during the pregnancy had simply stopped caring. Then the financial pressure started. My family never directly said, "You have to leave." Not at first. Instead, they began making comments. "Diapers aren't free. Your daughter's expenses keep increasing. We can't keep paying for everything." I knew that. I wasn't pretending otherwise. So I started looking for work. The problem was that finding a job while caring for a newborn wasn't easy. I sent applications. I made calls. I asked about part-time positions. One afternoon, I came home after an interview and found my mother sitting at the dining table with several bills in front of her. She pushed one toward me. "This is for the house." I looked at it. "What do you want me to do?" "Contribute." "I don't have a job yet." "Then find one." "I am trying." She folded her arms. "You're 21. You're old enough to understand that other people can't keep carrying you." I felt my face get hot. "I'm not asking you to raise my daughter." "Aren't you?" That hurt more than I wanted to admit. "I've been taking care of her every day, and we've been supporting you." I looked at her. "I never said I wasn't grateful." "No, you just act like we're supposed to keep doing this forever." I picked up the bill and placed it back on the table. "I'll figure it out." That night, after my daughter fell asleep, I sat on the edge of of my bed and cried quietly. Not because I wanted sympathy, because I was scared. I didn't know how I was going to build a life for two people when I could barely keep myself together. Then I remembered something. I remembered Daniel's old promise. We'll figure this out. I reached for my phone. I called him again. Nothing. I sent another message. Still nothing. I put the phone down. Then it buzzed. My heart jumped. But it wasn't Daniel. It was an unknown number. The message contained only 4 words. He didn't forget you. I stared at the screen. My hands went cold. I immediately replied. Who is this? No answer. I called the number. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. I showed the message to my mother. She barely glanced at it. Probably someone playing with you. Why would someone say that? Because they know you're desperate for him to come back. I wanted to believe her, but something about the message bothered me. He didn't forget you. Not he misses you. Not he'll come back. He didn't forget you. As if whoever sent it knew something I didn't. That was the first thing that made me question the story I had been telling myself. Maybe Daniel hadn't simply disappeared. Maybe there was something happening behind the silence. I started looking through old messages. There were conversations I'd ignored because they hadn't seemed important at the time. One message from Daniel stood out. If anyone asks, don't tell them where I am. I stared at it for several seconds. I didn't remember why he'd written that. I searched further. Another message. I'm trying to fix something before it reaches you. My heart started beating faster. What was he trying to fix? And why had he never told me? I confronted my mother. Did you know Daniel was dealing with something? She looked up from the kitchen counter. No. Are you sure? Yes. Because I found messages. Her expression changed for just a second. Then she looked away. Messages can say anything. You keep saying he abandoned me. Because he did. What if that's not what happened? My mother slammed the cabinet shut. You are still making excuses for someone who isn't here. He told me he was trying to fix something. And did he? I didn't answer. She stepped closer. Your daughter is here. You are here. He's not. Those words were impossible to argue with. So I went back to waiting. But something had changed. I wasn't waiting because I thought Daniel was coming to save me. I was waiting because I needed to know the truth. Then came the dinner that changed everything. My father was at the table. My brother was there. My mother placed a plate in front of me and sat down. For several minutes, nobody spoke. Then my father said, we need to discuss the situation. I already knew what he meant. What situation? Your living arrangement. My stomach tightened. My mother looked at me. You've had enough time. Enough time for what? To get yourself together. I laughed once because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I've been taking care of my baby every single day. And the family has been taking care of you. I've been trying to work. Trying isn't the same as succeeding. I looked around the table. Do any of you actually want me here? Nobody answered. That silence hurt more than an argument. My mother finally spoke. You made your choice. I looked at her. I chose my daughter. I didn't choose to lose my family. You chose this life. I had a baby. I didn't commit a crime. My brother shook his head. You keep waiting for him to save you. I turned toward him. I don't need him to save me. My voice cracked. I need you to stop treating me like I'm worthless. Nobody spoke. Then my mother said the words I had been terrified of hearing. If you can't follow the rules of this house, then maybe you shouldn't live here. I looked at her. Are you telling me to leave? She didn't answer immediately. Then she said, you're an adult. That was her answer. That night I packed. Not everything. There wasn't room. I packed diapers, clothes for my daughter, a few outfits for myself, her blanket, bottles, important documents, the little stuffed animal Daniel had bought before she was born. I stood in my room with one suitcase and looked around. This had been my home, my childhood home, the room where my mother had once sat beside me when I was sick, the hallway where my father had taught me how to ride a bicycle, the kitchen where we had laughed together. And now I was leaving it with my newborn daughter because everyone had decided I no longer belonged there. I carried the bags outside. My daughter was crying. I held her closer. It's okay, I whispered. I didn't know if I was saying it to her or myself. At the front door, I turned around. Will anyone help me? Silence. I looked at my mother. She wouldn't meet my eyes. My father stood behind her. My brother looked at the floor. Nobody came forward. My mother eventually placed a small amount of cash in my hand. That's all I can give you. I stared at it, then at her. Is that really all? She said nothing. I nodded slowly. Okay. And I walked away. I expected to feel broken. Instead, after the first few minutes, something inside me became strangely calm. I had my daughter. I had a suitcase. I had very little money. But I also had one thing I hadn't had before. A decision. I was done waiting for someone to rescue me. Over the next 3 months, I rebuilt my life one difficult day at a time. I found temporary housing. I took a small job that allowed me to work around my daughter's schedule. I learned how to stretch every dollar. I learned how to ask for help without feeling ashamed. Most importantly, I learned that being abandoned didn't mean I had to become helpless. My daughter became my reason to keep moving. Then, one ordinary morning, everything changed. I was standing outside my apartment when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered. A man's voice spoke quietly. Are you her? Who is this? There was a pause. Then he said, you need to know that Daniel is coming back. My entire body went still. Where is he? I can't tell you. Why? Another pause. Because if you knew why he disappeared, you'd understand why he couldn't come back sooner. The call ended. I stood there staring at my phone. For 3 months, I had forced myself to stop waiting. And now someone was telling me the man I thought had abandoned us was returning. But they hadn't told me why. Then, at 11:18 that morning, 6 black luxury vehicles turned onto the street where my family lived. And for the first time, my mother was about to see exactly who she had called a failure. The first thing I noticed was the sound. Not an engine revving, not tires screeching, just the steady, unfamiliar hum of several vehicles moving down the street at the same time. I stepped toward the window. Then I saw them. One black luxury SUV, then another, then another. 6 vehicles in total turned slowly onto the street and stopped outside my family's house. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Then the doors opened. Men in dark suits stepped out, not dramatically, not rushing, but with the quiet confidence of people who knew exactly what they were doing. Neighbors came outside. Someone across the street lifted a phone. My mother stepped onto the porch. She looked confused. Who are these people? My brother came beside her. I don't know. One of the men approached the gate. Is this the Carter residence? My mother frowned. Yes, why? We're here for Daniel Carter's family. Her expression changed. Daniel. The man nodded. He'll be arriving shortly. My mother's face went pale. What does he want? The man simply replied. To see his daughter. My heart stopped. Daniel. After months of silence, after unanswered calls, after I had cried myself to sleep wondering whether he had forgotten us, he was coming back. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or furious. Then the first vehicle's rear door opened, and he stepped out. Daniel. For a moment, I didn't recognize him. Not because he looked completely different, because he looked like someone who had been carrying something heavy for a very long time. His clothes were simple but expensive looking. Dark jacket, crisp shirt, no flashy jewelry, no arrogant smile. He looked calm, almost too calm. My mother stared at him. Then she whispered, "What happened to you?" Daniel looked toward the house, then toward me. His eyes immediately dropped to the little girl standing beside me. His daughter. Everything on his face changed. He took one step forward, then stopped. Is that her? I nodded. His voice became quieter. She got so big. I felt tears forming, but I refused to let them fall. You don't get to say that. He looked at me. You're right. You don't get to disappear for months and then show up like nothing happened. I know. Then tell me where you were. He took a breath. I will. My mother stepped between us. Daniel, you have some nerve coming here after everything. He looked at her. I'm not here to argue with anyone. Then why are you here? He looked at my daughter. I'm here for my family. My mother laughed bitterly. Family? You abandoned her. Daniel didn't respond immediately. Then he said, I know what it looked like. What it looked like, my mother snapped. You vanished. I did. You left a 21-year-old girl pregnant and alone. I know. Then explain it. Daniel looked at me. I should have explained everything from the beginning. I crossed my arms. Yes, you should have. He nodded. About 4 months before the baby was born, my father became seriously ill. I remembered the strange phone calls, the moments when Daniel had stared at his phone, the way he'd suddenly become distracted. He continued, my family owned a group of businesses. I wasn't supposed to take over anything. I had my own plans. He looked down. Then everything changed. His father had become unable to manage the companies, and Daniel was suddenly forced into responsibilities he hadn't expected. But that wasn't the worst part. There was a legal dispute involving the company, he said. People were trying to move money and transfer assets before everything could be investigated. My mother crossed her arms. And you couldn't make one phone call. Daniel looked ashamed. I made calls. I froze. What? I called. When? Several times. My face tightened. I never got them. I know. How? He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. I kept records. He showed me a series of messages. Messages I'd never received. Updates. Attempts to reach me. Offers to arrange financial support. Then I saw something that made my stomach drop. A message addressed to my mother. Please tell her I'm trying to resolve this. I don't want her involved until I know she's safe. I looked at my mother. She didn't speak. Did you get this? She looked away. Daniel's voice remained calm. I didn't understand what was happening on your side. My mother finally said, you weren't there. I know. You gave us no reason to trust you. I know. You expect us to believe you were some kind of hero. No. That answer silenced everyone. Daniel looked at me. I wasn't a hero. He paused. I made a terrible decision. What decision? I thought if I fixed everything first, I could come back with enough security to protect you and our daughter. I shook my head. You thought disappearing would protect me. No. His voice cracked slightly. I thought fixing everything first would protect you. I didn't understand that my silence was hurting you more than the problem itself. I looked at him. For months, I'd imagined this moment. I thought I'd scream. I thought I'd collapse into his arms. Instead, I felt something more complicated. Anger, relief, hurt, and distrust. You should have told me. I should have. You should have trusted me. I should have. You let me believe you didn't want us. He lowered his eyes. I know. My mother suddenly spoke. This still doesn't explain why you arrived with 6 cars. Daniel looked toward the vehicles. I didn't come here to show off. Then, what are all these people? Lawyers, business advisors, security. My brother stared at him. Security. Daniel nodded. The legal dispute is still being resolved. There are people who would benefit from my family losing control of the company. My mother became quiet. Then my brother muttered, so you're rich now. Daniel looked at him. No. My brother laughed awkwardly. You just arrived in 6 luxury vehicles. Daniel replied, the vehicles aren't mine. Everyone looked confused. My company provides transportation when I'm traveling with my legal and business team. That distinction somehow made everything more believable. He wasn't trying to impress us. He had simply arrived with the people responsible for helping him manage the situation. My mother looked at me, then at Daniel. For the first time, I could see uncertainty in her eyes. You could have helped her, she said. Daniel's expression hardened. I tried, but she was struggling. I know. She was sleeping in temporary temporary housing. His jaw tightened. I didn't know. You didn't know because you disappeared. I know. Nobody had anything to say after that. Then my mother looked at me. We thought he had abandoned you. I stared at her. You decided that. We were trying to protect you. No. My voice was calm. You were trying to protect yourselves. She shook her head. That isn't fair. I looked at the porch behind her. The porch where she had once placed my diaper bag. The porch where she had told me I had 5 minutes to leave. You didn't throw me out because I couldn't be a good mother. My mother went still. You threw me out because you were ashamed that I became one before you were ready. Her eyes filled with tears. I expected her to argue. She didn't. She simply whispered. I was scared. So was I. I thought you had ruined your life. I thought so too. Daniel stood quietly beside us. Then he said, I want to help. I turned toward him. I don't need you to prove you're rich. He looked at me. I need you to prove you're going to stay. His eyes filled with emotion. I will. You can't promise that in one sentence. I know. Then don't. He nodded. I'll prove it. And somehow, that meant more than any expensive car parked outside. Because money could buy a house. It could pay bills. It could provide security. But it couldn't undo the nights I'd spent wondering why I wasn't enough. It couldn't erase the humiliation of being forced onto a porch with my newborn daughter. And it couldn't instantly rebuild trust. That would take time. My mother eventually apologized. Not perfectly. Not with some dramatic speech. She simply said, I was wrong. I looked at her. I need time. She nodded. I understand. And if you want to be part of my daughter's life, you're going to have to respect my boundaries. She wiped her eyes. I will. I didn't hug her. Not that day. I wasn't ready. And I didn't hug Daniel either. I let him meet his daughter properly. I watched him hold her carefully, as though he was afraid she might disappear if he blinked. That was the moment I realized something. The cars weren't the shocking part. The money wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was finally hearing the truth. And for the first time since becoming a mother, I understood that I didn't have to choose between being loved and protecting myself. I could do both. But this time, I would decide who earned the right to stay. The morning after Daniel returned, nothing felt magically fixed. That was the strange part. There were expensive vehicles outside. There were lawyers and business advisors waiting for him. There were explanations for the months of silence. There was finally an answer to the question that had kept me awake so many nights. But when I woke up the next morning, I was still me. Still a 21-year-old mother. Still hurt. Still trying to figure out what came next. Money could solve problems I had once thought were impossible. It couldn't erase what had happened. Daniel understood that. He didn't arrive at my apartment the next morning with a suitcase full of gifts. He arrived with diapers. I opened the door and stared at him. He held up the bag. I wasn't sure which brand you use. I almost smiled. That's because you haven't been here. He nodded. I know. He didn't argue. That became one of the first things I noticed about him. When I was angry, he didn't try to win. He listened. When I told him I needed space, he gave me space. When I told him he couldn't simply walk into my life and expect to be called a father because he had money, he agreed. I have a lot to make up for, he said. You do. I know. And I'm not going to pretend everything is fine. I don't want you to. So we started slowly. He learned my daughter's routine. He learned which bottle she preferred. He learned that she hated being rushed into her coat. He learned that she fell asleep faster when someone walked around the room with her. The first time he managed to calm her without asking me what to do. I stood in the doorway and watched. He looked down at her and whispered, your mother is going to be very proud of you. Then he looked at me. She already is. I looked away because I wasn't ready for how much that affected me. He wasn't perfect. There were still awkward moments. There were times he didn't know what to say. There were decisions we disagreed about, but he kept showing up. That mattered more than promises. My own life was changing too. I moved into a better apartment, but I paid the rent myself. Daniel offered to cover everything. I refused. You don't have to prove you're a good father by paying for my entire life. He nodded. So what do you want me to handle? The things that belong to our daughter. He thought about it. Fair. That became our arrangement. He contributed to her expenses. I continued working. I continued my education. And slowly, I started rebuilding the plans I'd abandoned. For the first time, I wasn't trying to prove anything to my family. I wasn't trying to prove I was a good daughter. I wasn't trying to prove Daniel was innocent. I wasn't trying to prove that becoming a mother hadn't ruined my future. I was simply building one. 3 months passed, then 6. My daughter started walking. Daniel was there for the first few steps. I was there too. We both laughed when she took 2 steps and immediately sat down. He looked at me. Did you see that? I saw. She walked. I know. He smiled. She really walked. It was such a small moment, but I remember thinking that this was what consistency looked like. Not luxury cars, not expensive gifts, not dramatic promises, just being there. My relationship with my mother was harder. She called often. Sometimes I answered. Sometimes I didn't. At first, she wanted everything to return to normal, but I didn't want the old normal. The old normal was what had taught me to ignore my own boundaries. One afternoon, she asked, when can I see her? I paused. You can see her when we agree on a time. She sounded surprised. I'm her grandmother. I know. I should be able to see my granddaughter. You will. Then why does it feel like I have to ask permission? Because trust has to be rebuilt. Silence. Then she said, are you punishing me? No. I looked out the window. I'm protecting my daughter. That conversation changed something between us. My mother finally understood that forgiveness didn't mean pretending nothing had happened. She apologized again. This time, there were no excuses. I thought I was protecting the family, she said. You were protecting the family's image. She was quiet. Then she admitted, nodded. Maybe I was. I appreciated the honesty, but I still wasn't ready to forget. I didn't need to. Forgiveness wasn't a door I had to walk through immediately. It could be a road, something I traveled slowly. Some relatives came back into my life. Others didn't. My brother eventually apologized too. He told me, "I thought you were waiting for Daniel to fix everything." I smiled faintly. I was waiting for someone to care. He looked down. "I should have cared more." "You should have." He nodded. There was no dramatic hug, no perfect family reunion, just two people finally saying the things they should have said months earlier. Then came my daughter's first birthday. I decorated the apartment myself. Nothing extravagant. A small cake, a few balloons, pictures along the wall. My mother arrived early. She stood in the doorway and watched me carry plates from the kitchen. For a moment, I saw something in her expression. Pride, not because I was finally living the life she had wanted, but because I had built a life she had once believed I couldn't handle. She walked over. "You look happy." I smiled. "I am." She looked around the room. "You did all this?" "Most of it." She nodded. Then she looked at my daughter. "She has your determination." I laughed. "She got that from somewhere." My mother smiled. "I deserved that." I didn't deny it. Later that evening, after everyone left, I sat beside my daughter's crib. She was asleep. I watched her tiny chest rise and fall, and I thought about the girl I had been a year earlier. 21, terrified, standing on a porch with a suitcase and a newborn. I used to think being thrown out was the worst thing my family could do to me. Eventually, I realized it forced me to discover something I had never learned while living under their roof. I could build a life without waiting for permission. I could love people without depending on them for my identity. I could accept help without surrendering control. And I could forgive someone without giving them the power to hurt me the same way again. The strangest part happened 4 months later, when my mother called me for a reason I never expected. "I wanted to ask you something," she said. "What?" "Would you let me help you with the business?" I laughed. "What business?" "The event planning business you always talked about." I went quiet. She remembered. After everything, she still remembered. "I don't need you to finance it," I said. "I know." "Then what do you mean?" "I know people. I can introduce you." I sat back in my chair. For years, I had thought my mother either had to be completely in my life or completely out of it. But maybe there was another possibility. Maybe people could change. Maybe relationships could change. Maybe forgiveness didn't mean returning to the way things were. It meant deciding what the relationship could safely become. I accepted her offer, not because I owed her another chance, because I wanted to. A year after I left that house, I had my own home, my own income, my own plans. My daughter had a father who was finally present, and my family had learned that loving me didn't mean controlling my choices. One evening, Daniel came by after work. He put a small package on the table. "What is that?" I asked. "A birthday gift for her." "You're early." "I know." I smiled. He looked toward the living room. "She's asleep." "Already?" He nodded. Then he looked at me. "You okay?" I thought about the question. A year earlier, I would have said yes even when I wasn't. Now I answered honestly. "I'm getting there." He smiled. "That's enough." I watched him walk toward the nursery, and I realized that my life hadn't become perfect. It had become real. There were still difficult conversations. There were still wounds. There were still things I hadn't completely forgiven. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of being alone. Not of disappointing people. Not of someone deciding that my life wasn't good enough. For a long time, I thought the story was about the day my family rejected me. Now I think it's about what happened after they did. Because that was the day I stopped waiting for permission to become the woman I was always capable of being. Looking back now, I understand something I couldn't understand when I was 21. Being rejected by people you love can make you question everything. Your choices, your worth, your judgment, even your right to believe in yourself. For a long time, I thought my family throwing me out meant they had discovered something terrible about me. Maybe I was irresponsible. Maybe I had ruined my future. Maybe I wasn't the daughter they thought I was. But eventually, I realized something important. Making mistakes doesn't make someone worthless. I made mistakes. Daniel made mistakes. My mother made mistakes. None of us handled everything perfectly. Daniel should have told me the truth sooner. I should have asked harder questions instead of assuming everything would work itself out. My mother should have supported me without making me feel ashamed for becoming a mother so young. And I should have understood sooner that loving someone doesn't mean accepting everything they do to you. That's probably the biggest lesson I took from everything. Family matters, but family doesn't get a free pass to hurt you. Sometimes people can love you and still hurt you deeply. Sometimes they can believe they're protecting you while actually making you feel completely alone. And sometimes forgiveness is possible without going back to the way things were. I learned that boundaries aren't revenge. When I told my mother she couldn't simply walk back into my life and pretend nothing had happened, I wasn't punishing her. I was protecting the life I had worked so hard to build. And slowly, she understood. One evening, months after my daughter's first birthday, my mother and I were sitting together while my daughter played nearby. My mother looked at me and said, "I wish I had understood sooner." I looked at her for a moment. "So do I." She lowered her eyes. I reached across the table. "But understanding now is better than never understanding at all." That didn't erase the past, but it gave us somewhere to begin. If you've ever been made to feel like you were too young, too different, too difficult, or simply not what your family expected, you know how heavy that judgment can feel. Maybe you've been the person everyone blamed. Maybe you've been the one who had to leave. Maybe you've spent years trying to earn approval from people who should have loved you you, without conditions. If that's you, I hope you remember this. Someone else's disappointment in your life does not automatically mean you failed. And being rejected doesn't have to become your identity. Sometimes the family you were born into teaches you what love shouldn't feel like, and the life you build afterward teaches you what it can. So if you were in my position, would you have given my family another chance, or would you have kept your distance? I'd genuinely like to know. Share your thoughts in the comments, but remember that behind every story like this is a real human experience. Be respectful of people whose choices are different from yours. And if you enjoy stories about complicated families, hidden truths, betrayal, forgiveness, and the moments when everything isn't what it first appears to be, subscribe. Because the next story begins with a family celebration that looks completely innocent until one unexpected discovery makes everyone question why they were invited in the first place. Sometimes the truth doesn't arrive with a warning. Sometimes it walks quietly through the front door, and by the time everyone realizes what it means, it's already